Hi, my name is Leah Milcarek and I'm an engineer. I currently work for a company called Edison Solutions in a job called a Senior Program Manager. That probably doesn't mean a whole lot to anybody, but really what it means is I'm an engineer who works with customers to figure out what kind of projects we want to do. So I specifically work in energy right now. So I do projects that are energy efficiency, which is helping customers use less energy at a school, at hospital, for a government building, for a library. Or I do projects that helps customers generate energy from something like solar panels or wind turbines, or even the wastewater treatment plants that process everything we flush down the toilet. They take methane gas off of that and use it as fuel to generate electricity. So lots of kind of interesting work, all in energy and all because I'm an engineer. So what I really wanted to talk about is how I got to where I am and what I'm doing, particularly because the path I took was really unusual. Most people who are engineers start off right out of high school. They know they're going to go to engineering school and they go to college for engineering. I did not know that I wanted to be an engineer originally, and so I went to school and studied theater, and I designed costumes. So I got a degree in costume design, which is all sorts of creative thinking. It's a lot of hands-on artwork. And I graduated. I got a job. I worked in different theater companies all over the United States for about 4 years, designing costumes for the opera, designing costumes for Shakespeare, for Summit Theater, for musicals, and I eventually wound up living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, Pittsburgh is a really interesting city because it's full of hills and valleys and rivers, and so it has, they say, almost as many bridges as Venice, Italy, which is a city built on a waterway and is full of canals. So that was really neat. So there were all these beautiful old bridges in Pittsburgh that had been built from like the early 1900s all the way to, modern bridges that were getting built currently. And I was really fascinated with all these bridges and their history and what bridges meant about connecting different places and allowing people to get to each other where they used to be divided. And I thought it would be really cool to make bridges. But when you have an art degree, you can't just start making bridges because you have no idea what you're doing. So I went back to school and I got a degree in engineering. And what I studied is called civil engineering. And then specifically within civil engineering, what I studied is called structural engineering. So structural engineers are the people who design bridges, they design buildings. For buildings, they work with architects who decide how things look, and then they work on the structure to make sure everything stays up. So I was lucky enough that I had some really good professors. Took me about 3 years because this was my second degree. So they looked at my first degree and they said, okay, you've had all sorts of writing and communication and history and all the other kind of classes you have to take. So when I studied engineering, I took nothing but math, science, and engineering for 3 years. And it was really intense. But when I was done, I got a job working as a structural engineer. So I started off in the office having no idea how to read plans, no idea what kind of codes were required to follow in order to design things so they were safe. I didn't know anything other than like basic stuff they teach you in school about how things work. So I started designing bridges, little parts that the people who are more senior than me would review my calculations and they would make sure I was looking at the right codes and that I was really learning on the job and understanding how to do what I was doing. And then within about 3 or 4 years, I had learned enough about what I needed to know in designing bridges and about how long it took to get things done and how to make a good plan and work with the team. And so I was actually leading the team for designing small bridges and culverts, which are a little type of bridge over water that's not a big river. So it was really exciting for me to have that opportunity to use some of the skills that I learned when I studied theater about creative problem solving and communication and organization, and apply those with the skills I had learned from engineering about how to design bridges and how to understand codes and how to develop drawings and do calculations, to actually put those pieces together and be the person leading the team to figure out how to solve the problem to make a new bridge, repair an old bridge. It's pretty interesting work. But it also meant that I had the opportunity to get in front of other kinds of leaders in the company, because I was in this leadership role leading these bridge teams. And so eventually I met some leadership people in the company who worked in energy. And they said, wow, you're really good at leading these teams. You're really good at organizing things. Would you like to work in energy? It's an emerging field. A lot of new and exciting stuff is happening. You'd kind of be on the cutting edge of what's happening. And I thought, that sounds really interesting. I've never done that before. And so I said yes. And so I went from being a structural engineer who designed bridges to being a project manager in energy who is responsible for teams. And there was a whole lot I didn't know about energy, so I had to learn about mechanical engineering and electrical engineering and a whole different set of codes and requirements and how things worked. But I now had the job of working with all these other engineers and working with the customer to make sure projects got built. And that's how I got involved with the energy efficiency projects I described earlier. So I would work on helping schools use less energy by putting light sensors in so that when no one was in the room, the lights would switch off, helping set schedules for the heating and cooling systems so that when no one was in the building wasn't being heated for no reason, those kind of programs. And I also worked with different cities and communities and governments to help them develop plans. One of the really neat things I did is I got to work on some of the pilot programs that New York City was doing when they were figuring out their whole plan for the whole city of how they were going to meet their energy reduction and greenhouse gas related goals to help with their ideas about climate change. And I also got to actually write plans for some other cities when they were looking at, say, the same kind of issues of how can we use less energy, how can we reduce our greenhouse gases. So it was really neat to be on the very front end of helping cities strategize what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. And again, this is an opportunity I got because I had really good technical skills. I knew how to think through problems. I was good at working with people, and I was good at communicating with people, and in the end, pulling it all together and making something that made sense for everyone who would use it going forward. And so it's been really, really interesting for me to take all those skills, and it eventually put me into a role that's called business development, which is what I'm doing now, which is working with customers and engineers at the very front end of projects when they're figuring out, we have this need, there's a thing we want to do, maybe we need to replace some equipment, maybe we just want to use less energy, maybe we want to generate power so that we don't have to buy as much energy from the electrical grid. And so I get involved really early in helping the customer figure out what they need, what they want, working with the engineers to see if we can develop a good solution. And now I get involved with things like the economics. Like, does the money make sense? Does this project save enough energy that it makes it worth the customer doing it because they're going to save enough in their utility bills that the project will pay for itself? Or, you know, we do greenhouse gas calculations. Is this meet a goal that they're trying to meet for how much greenhouse gases that they want to reduce? So it's really interesting to be way on the front end of projects. I used to be sort of in the middle of projects once we already had the project defined. That's where the project manager comes in and they make sure it gets done. And then originally I was an engineer, so I was the person actually doing the work on the project. So I've gone through all these different levels in my engineering career and sort of grown and moved forward and have new kinds of opportunities. And it's really because I've been able to combine all these different skills I've had over the different careers that I've had. And so I really wanted to share this because I think it's really fascinating to realize that things you might be learning at one point in your life become really valuable at another point in your life and help you move forward and give you opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have. So something's going to come next. I'm sure there'll be other things I will do after this, and I'm sure that I will build on the skills that I have right now to make those happen. So I hope that was interesting, and I hope you guys think about engineering as something you might want to pursue. Thank you so much.